Good afternoon and good morning, everyone connecting from various places, and welcome to Asia Impact Webinar Series. My name is Sin Young Park. I'm the Director of Regional Cooperation and Integration at ADB's Economic Research Department. I'll be your host for this webinar. The Asia Impact Webinar is a key dissemination platform for the Economic Research Department to showcase its research work on critical policy issues for Asia and Pacific. And for today, we'll be discussing a trending topic on digital transformation in the post-COVID-19 world. COVID-19 has restricted our mobility and interactions with each other, and it has also affected our work, education, business, and social life. Through the rise of digital and mobile technologies, we have been able to continue working, studying online, buying medicine and groceries, conducting meetings, relaxing, and also keeping in touch with friends and families. This still shift continuously to online space and beyond the pandemic world. Today, we have a distinguished panel of 4 experts to discuss the role of digital transformation for recovery and promoting economic growth within and beyond post-COVID world. Without further ado, let me call on Dr. James Villavute, who's a senior economist and economic research department of ADB, who will make a presentation, digitalization and economic recovery in the post-COVID-19 world. James, the floor is yours.
Okay, thank you, Sin Yang, and good afternoon, everyone. The material I'm presenting today is part of the 2021 AEIR team chapter, Making Digital Platform Work for Asia. As we all know, digital apps like Google, Lazada, Grab, Airbnb, and Netflix have changed the way we work, socialize, and create economic value. These apps have created technological networks where buyers, suppliers, and advertisers can interact to exchange goods, services, and information. They use data and algorithm to bypass intermediaries, to skip trade barriers, and reduce the production and distribution of goods, thereby allowing small households, individuals, and even SMEs to sell domestically and globally. Next slide, please. In 2019, digital platforms have generated 3.8 trillion revenue globally, which is equivalent to 4.4% of global GDP. Roughly around half or 48% of these digital platform revenues have been generated in Asia, equivalent to 1.8 trillion, or about 6% of the regional GDP. When you look at the role of Asia in digital platform, Asia is front and center in the digital platform competition. Roughly around 60% of digital platform users are located in the region, and they are growing yearly by around 18%. In terms of digital platform revenue, the growth of revenue in the region is also growing faster than the growth of revenue globally. However, there are 2 facts about digital platforms that are quite worrisome. The first fact is that digital platforms are highly concentrated. For example, if you look at the top 70 digital platforms, they are mostly located in the US and in Asia, with very little presence in Europe, Latin America, or Africa. Within the region, it is also true that the digital penetration varies quite a lot, with very high presence in PRC, Korea, Japan, Singapore, Hong Kong, but many of the smaller Asian economies have also very little or nascent digital presence. Next slide, please. The COVID-19 pandemic has also elevated the importance of digital platform. For example, the chart on the left-hand side shows you the changing firm behavior, where the size of field sales team and inside sales team among these companies have actually shrunk during COVID, whereas the use of online support and e-commerce have risen. On the right-hand side, you can see the net change in terms of the proportion of consumers that have been relying on e-commerce to get their goods, groceries, medicines, and other supplies. Next slide, please. That's why one of the questions that we try to answer in the team chapter is, what will happen if this digital sector grow faster after COVID because of the demand to minimize physical contact and make it safer? So to answer this question, we use the dynamic version of the Global Trade Analysis Project, the CGE model, called GDIME, which was actually developed by Walmsley 2012 to simulate what would happen if digital platforms between 2020 to 2025 actually grow 20% higher than the normal expected growth. And then from 2025 to 2030, it grows 25% higher than the normal or expected growth. The data that we use for this simulation is the GTAP 10A database, which was updated up to 2019 using World Bank and ADB MRIOT, or multi-regional input-output tables. For the 2020 baseline, we applied the COVID impact analysis that we have undertaken in June based on policy brief 133. And then beyond 2020, we adopted the international projections from OECD, World Bank, IMF, UN, which was collated and presented in the shared socioeconomic pathway by the Institute for Applied Systems Analysis located in Vienna. Next slide, please. Please note that in this analysis, we looked at two scenarios, a medium-term scenario where, as I said, the digital sector grows by 20% on top of the normal growth from 2020 to 25, and a long-term scenario where digital sector grows 25% higher than the normal growth from 2025 to 2030. To make a long story short, this chart shows you the impact of this digital sector expansion on GDP. So in terms of global GDP will increase by roughly 6.8 trillion in 2025 and by 13.8 trillion in 2030, which is equivalent to 8.6% and 17.5% of the 2020 global GDP. For Asia, output will increase by 2.7 trillion in 2025 and by 5.6 trillion in 2030, equivalent to 9.4% and 16.9% of 2020 regional GDP. The chart on the right-hand side shows you the increase in GDP of the US and of China. The triangle is actually the absolute change in 2025 and 2030. So for example, for the US, output will increase by 1.1 trillion in 2025 and by 2.3 trillion in 2030. And for PRC, output will increase by roughly 0.9 trillion in 2025 and 1.9 trillion in 2030. Next slide, please. So this table shows you the GDP impact on the various selected economies and region. And one interesting result is that if you look at the sub-region in Asia, the Pacific, Central Asia, and Southeast Asia are actually the sub-regions which are actually experiencing large impact on GDP. Mainly, this reflects the fact that digital connectivity is actually a very effective means of managing some of these geographical challenges. They also reflect the increasing role of digital connectivity in pushing services exports, as well as the large impact of the introduction of greater digital sector on productivity for economies with very low income. Next slide, please. However, there's a huge investment requirement to realize this digital transformation dividend. So for example, in 2025, this would require around 472 billion of investment in the digital sector, and in 2030, this would require almost 865.6 billion of investment in digital sector. So it will not come automatically. Many countries in the region needs to double or probably increase, not necessarily double, but increase their investment in telecommunications and ICT sector quite significantly. Next slide, please. In terms of employment impact, the number of global jobs will also increase by 112.5 million in 2025 and by 218.1 million in 2030. So these increase in employment are equivalent to 4.1% increase in employment in 2025 and 7.9% increase in baseline employment in 2030. For Asia, roughly around 57.7 million new jobs will be created in 2025 and 109.4 million jobs in 2030. This is roughly around half of the jobs that will be created globally. Next slide, please. Again, this just tells you the distribution of the job creation across the different subregions in Asia and other economies like the G2 and Europe. Next slide, please. Now, in terms of trade, the expansion of the digital sector will also expectedly increase global trade by around 3 trillion in 2025 and 6.4 trillion in 2030, which is equivalent to 7.1% and 14.9% of the 2020 trade values. Roughly 40% of this increase in trade will accrue to Asia. So in Asia, total trade will increase by 1.2 trillion in 2025 and by 2.5 trillion in 2030, which is equivalent to 8% and almost 17% of the 2020 trade values. Next slide, please. Again, this tells you the distribution of the trade impacts by key countries and region, and these are there for your reference. Next slide, please. However, despite these very rosy projections on the digital transformation, I would like to highlight that the digital transformation, there are also so many number of risks and challenges that economies in the region and economies globally need to manage. As I mentioned earlier, one of the concerns is that these digital platforms or these digital industries are highly concentrated and because of the network effects, they tend to lead to a single winner. The other concern is that these digital platform companies have actually been collecting huge amount of data, sharing data, and sometimes selling data. And this actually raises very important data privacy and security concern. Our third concern is that as a result of this digital platform, so many online employment has mushroomed, but they are quite insecure. They are not permanent employment. They are usually independent contractors with very little security and also very little social security protection. We have also observed, especially during the lockdown, during the COVID-19 pandemic, the rising cyber crimes and identity thefts, which is quite worrisome. Another concern, especially for government, is that despite the huge super profit generated by this technological company, there is a practice of base erosion and profit shifting, which is affecting the fiscal sustainability of especially many governments, considering that they are actually spending a lot of money in terms of macroeconomic fiscal stimulus. The sixth challenge that the region also need to consider is that the e-readiness in terms of digital penetration varies a lot. So that one worry is that maybe these differences in e-readiness combined with digital divide can actually bring rising inequality. Next slide, please. Therefore, this last slide shows you the 6 key priorities that we think are important to be able to leverage on this digital transformation. The first two bullet items are actually priorities in terms of investing in transactional infrastructure, such as investing in affordable and reliable and accessible ICT, as well as broadening e-payment options and availability to expand the financial payment system. The third and the fourth bullets are actually actions related to improving business processes, such as improving logistics and delivery infrastructure, because the digital connectivity also needs to interface with the actual delivery of the goods and services itself. And then the fourth one is actually related to skills. We need to improve digital skills, competency, and literacy, and use more ICT devices and learning environment to ensure that we train our workers for the work for the workplace of the future. Items 5 and 6 are actually related to taxation in terms of developing clear tax policies and options to plug some of these tax leakages and strengthen international cooperation for better taxation. And last but not the least, we have to design an effective regulatory environment that will also manage this risk, but at the same time ensure that the innovation will benefit everyone. Next slide, please. So that ends my presentation. And as I said earlier, the 2021 AER team chapter, Making Digital Platform Work for Asia, will be released early next year around February. And that actually covers many of these issues that we've just presented. Thank you, Sinyang. Back to you.
Thank you, James. Very comprehensive and useful presentation. I believe that it presented really vast sort of economic opportunities, but also listed quite a few areas for policymakers' consideration as these digital technology, digital platforms do present disruptive forces for traditional services industries and the way of doing business and various traditional industries. So now let me introduce our distinguished panelists who will join us in the discussion about these policy issues of digital transformation. First, Ms. Barbara Navarro, who is the head of Google Cloud Asia Pacific Channel. Before joining Google, she was with NBC Universal as Director of Regulatory Affairs for Spain, Portugal at Clark Model and Corporation, and intellectual property firm in Latam as a Director of Trademarks. Barbara was also a lawyer by academic credential and has an executive MBA at IESE Business School. She has taught at the law school for 8 years. Our second panelist is Dr. Jung-Hwa Lee, who is a professor of economics at Korea University. Previously, he served as a senior advisor for international economic affairs to former president of Republic of Korea. He also previously worked as a chief economist and director general of economic research department at ADB and as an economist at IMF. He has taught at Harvard and Peking University before. He has also published extensively on topics widely ranging from human capital, economic growth, financial crisis, and economic integration in leading academic journals. He is a regular columnist for Project Syndicate. He has earned his PhD and master's in economics from Harvard University. Our third panelist is Dr. Shatib Basri, who is a former Minister of Finance in Indonesia. Previously, he also served as the chairman of the Indonesian Investment Coordinating Board. He was with Ash Center Senior Fellow at the Harvard Kennedy School at Harvard University, Pacific Leadership Fellow at the Center on Global Transformation, University of California at San Diego. He was at NTUC, Professor of International Economic Relations, RSIS, and Nanyang Technology University, Singapore. Dr. Basri is also a member of the World Bank Advisory Council on Gender and Development. The last panelist to join is Dr. Rajiv Kumar, who is a leading Indian economist and is a vice chairman of NITI Aayog India. He is the author of several books on the Indian economy and national security. He is the chancellor of Gokal Institute of Economics and Politics in Pune and the founding director of Pale India Foundation, a non-profit research organization that specializes in policy-oriented research and analysis. He is currently sitting on the boards of several international and national institutions, including the King Abdullah Petroleum Studies and Research Center, the Economic Research Institute for ASEAN and Asia in Jakarta, the State Bank of India, and the Indian Institute of Foreign Trade. He was a member of the Government of India's National Security Advisory Board between 2006 and 2008. And he has a PhD from Lucknow University, has a Dr. Phil in economics from Oxford. I would like to invite each panelist to share some thoughts about the challenges and opportunities brought by digital transformation. Barbara, perhaps you can start first. Can you unmute? Yes.
Yes. Wait, okay, I'm seeing a message in my screen, but I think it's fine. Here we go. Okay, hi everybody. Thank you very much for the invitation to participate in this session. The question is about challenges and opportunities, right?
Yes.
Yeah, I will say, let me start saying that these are very challenging times because we are navigating a lot of ambiguity, okay? And I think that the fact that it's the first time that we go through a situation like this, and the fact that we don't know when the situation is gonna end, makes us feel very uncomfortable. I think that that is one of the challenges. We are all out of our comfort zone. Then, because this topic is about digital transformation, let me focus on what are the challenges and opportunities there. The challenges is the speed. You know, we were ready. I mean, we were ready, no, let's put it that way. We were on our way to see our economies digitalized, right? This is not new, it was there. We have been talking about this for years. We were not ready for the speed, right? This is the main challenge. Is this going very fast? And if it's going very fast, how we are gonna be able to adjust to this speed, okay? Then it's not the concept of digitalization what is a challenge, it's the speed, right? And that is what basically, in my opinion, I will put as a top challenge. In terms of the opportunities, I want to specifically, a couple of minutes, focus on APAC, right? Why is APAC extremely well positioned to really approach this digitalization in the best way possible? And let me go through a couple of topics here. First of all is talent. And you know, APAC has full of talent and ambition, and this is key to unlock the possibility of the economic recovery for APAC. Then I think it is very important that if we connect all the entrepreneurship, the talent entrepreneurship, with the 4.5 billion plus people, and we give the digital tools that are needed and access to internet, the economic recovery of APAC is a fact. Second, it's connectivity, and this was said before by Mr. Villafuente. I mean, connectivity is key, right? And what happens with APAC? APAC, it's, as I said, is very fast going through this digitalization, and the majority of internet users today are in APAC. We will move from 2.1 billion to 3.1 billion in 2023. Then this is something that plays in favor of APAC. Last one, governments. Governments are super focused on digitalization in this region. I'm European, right? I'm impressed how focused they are on digitalization. India, Indonesia, Thailand, just to name a few, they have a digital economy master plan. South Korea, together with Japan and others, they are leading 5G deployment, which is, it's something really, really important. Last but not least, SMEs. it's good that 96% of in Asia are SMEs. It is good because no one is going to benefit more from this digital economy than SMEs. And we have done a lot of research that shows how SMEs can benefit from export time that they need to invest in export, also cost of export when they are digital. Then I'm gonna finish here because I don't want to take more time, but this will be my analysis of challenges and opportunities. Thank you.
Well, Professor Lee, do you have any thoughts and then responses to the presentation James made?
Thank you, Dr. Park, and I enjoyed this ADB's presentation. It raised many important issues, and as it emphasized, yes, we see some opportunities even during these very difficult times. And as it emphasized, now digitalization is accelerating, and private companies and government are using digital platforms to address the pandemic, as we see now. And this can bring the significant opportunities. Yes, it has emphasized. But one important question is whether the expansion of digital platforms and digital sector can generate significant aggregate economic benefits in Asia and Pacific in a foreseeable future. It's just previous presenter also mentioned these challenges. So I'm a little bit cautious, though not pessimistic, than this ADB. So let me just elaborate my point by emphasizing the two issues. First, it may take a long time until this digital sector drive economic growth in Asia. Yes, we have seen this rise of the digital economy, including mobile technology, internet, and communication equipment and software, and even the new applications in the cloud. That is not new. The prices of digital assets, including computer and softwares, have continued to decline relative to the average prices. That gives significant opportunities to the businesses because it can operate at low cost and more higher efficiency. But there is the productivity paradox that has been emphasized. While the economy is digitalizing at such a rapid pace, we have not observed much faster productivity growth. Why? Because this is the issue is related to limited adoption. Because the ICT development and productivity increased in the such sectors, like in businesses, but it requires some organization change and also workers training to really utilize this ICT skills, this ICT technology. So that's basically it's an aggregate level. Productivity growth has been a little bit slow. I mean, I'm saying that yes, there is productivity growth, but it could be slow. I mean, so we don't know whether it will happen until 2030 and 2040. I mean, this as estimated by the ADB. So another related issue is the so-called creative destruction. Yes, now I'm now at Seoul. Now I see the e-commerce is really dominating the businesses, but that's a new development. But you see some retailers, they got hit by this expansion of this e-business. So this is a so-called creative destruction. Yes, this rapid expansion of the new technology and new industry can make all the technology and all the industries obsolete. So this kind of the issue is we need to fully aware. I mean, we can argue that this time is different. Now we really see the expansion of the digital transformation and digital sector expanding quite rapidly during the crisis time. But what happened in the next year, what happened in 5 years, in 10 years, is this may not be automatically leading to the productivity increase. And to relate to the issue is the second point is again, I mean, this really emphasized by the ADB presentation. That's the key, whether this digitalization can benefit all people. This is the relate to the employment creation, as emphasized here. Yes, it can create the jobs because now we see the new opportunities, but it also relates to the wage inequality. There is a lot of evidence that this big businesses or big new technology development can make the digital, can benefit some people who can have digital skills to make use of the new technologies, but other people cannot really use these new technologies. That's wage inequality could be widened. So this kind of the issue is there. And then the digital divide is also important issue because in Asia, many poor household children and older people are left behind. I mean, so this is clearly some challenges to the government, I guess. So I just raised at this stage a little bit skepticism, but I'm not pessimistic. And then I want to just emphasize the one issue. It's really unfair. I mean, we really focus on only the GDP increase and then productivity increase, because this digital transformation really creates benefits. It cannot be measured by the GDP and productivity. I believe this is a huge potential for digitalization and digital sector, and in general, innovation can contribute to the public health, as we see the environment and consumer welfare, and could add the value to the society as a whole. So I think it's the successful digital transformation may go beyond the kind of measurement just by the GDP and productivity. We can live healthier and longer because of this kind of new technologies. And then we can enjoy better work-life balance by staying at home and office, and then could participate in this webinar, which is operated in I don't know where you are operating this new technology, maybe not in Manila. So let me stop here. So basically this productivity paradox issues, we need to a little bit think of that, and digital divide issues. This is all related to some policy challenges. I mean, you cannot really just accept this can bring the huge benefit and opportunities. We need to do something. Okay, let me stop here.
Thank you, Professor Lee. In fact, he brought up really a lot of very important and interrelated issues of the challenges and risks also posed by the digital transformation trend. In fact, the COVID is set to accelerate this speed of digital transformation. Many panelists already pointed to risks of being so fast. But do you, Dr. Basri, feel that the digital role is important, like how to really support the economic recovery? What is the role of these digital platforms in this economic recovery after COVID?
Thank you very much, Dr. Lee. Can you hear me?
Yes.
I think it's a bit difficult to give my comment because most of my comments has been stolen by Ms. Navarro and also Professor Lee. So let me try to focus on the few issues. First, I think I would like to congratulate James Villafuerte for this report. This is a very interesting and good report, and I agree about this opportunity. I call this situation is accidental digital transformation, because exactly like what Barbara said, we are not, the digital transformation is there, but we are not really ready, about the speed. But because the COVID, that we have to transform ourselves. And if you look at talking about the opportunities, I think all of us will agree that this accidental transformation really shift the business model that leverage digital infrastructure for production, supply chains, etc. Right? And even we also see that the role of this digital technology in helping and reopening the economy. Yeah, because this lockdown the social distancing will require people to make a distance. The only market that exists is only through the virtual, like what we are doing now. So the online activities become very crucial. And even for the, we can use the big data, artificial intelligence, modeling, everything's now is rely so much on the on digital technologies. And we have seen it. So if we are talking about these opportunities, I completely agree with James. The opportunities is there. And I think every country now, they have to transform themselves accidentally to speed up the process of the transformation. And this will help a lot of things, especially the recovery process. Yeah, but let me highlight some of the issues that maybe some countries, especially in ASEAN, in Southeast Asia, that they have to face. Yeah, we cannot put Singapore as a benchmark because Singapore is always an outlier. Yeah, but we have to, I'm talking about the Southeast Asian economies, especially Indonesia. If you're talking about this digital transformation, the first thing that we have to discuss is about infrastructure. Yeah, because if you're talking about this infrastructure, you're talking about Manila or maybe Jakarta or Seoul or Tokyo, the infrastructure is there. But if you're talking country like Laos, like Myanmar, or even eastern part of Indonesia, it's very difficult when the government try to conduct the online education system now, yeah, school from home. The difficulties is they don't have enough access for the internet because the infrastructure is not ready yet. So Barbara question about the speed, maybe it's not easy for some of these countries because even the hard infrastructure is not available. Yeah, and then exactly like James mentioned, the issue is about if they want to build the infrastructure, there will be a huge investment. Yeah, but I can see, because I can see that if I'm talking about Indonesia, the only business that moving now is the online business. So the private sector definitely will put more money or transform their business model into the digital. And that's already happening, like food delivery, everything. You're talking about groceries, supermarket, everything's become e-commerce now. Yeah. So the demand, the appetite from the private sector is there. But what about like if this non-commercially viable, the role of state has to step in. Maybe even like the multilateral institution like ADB need to get involved. Some of this, the multilateral institution probably need to think about what kind of the financing scheme that we need in order to deliver this digital infrastructure. Secondly, Professor Lee already mentioned about this issue of this inequality. Because the inequality of this issue of infrastructure, people in the urban, they do have an access. But you can imagine people like in Myanmar, in Laos, in Cambodia, perhaps not all of us, they have enough access. So you can see the impact on the human capital in the future because they cannot go to school, they don't have an access, similar like situation in the eastern part of Indonesia. So somehow we have to think about the adjustment process. I'm quite optimistic if you're talking about the long term, this digital technology will create jobs. Yeah, we learned from the Industrial Revolution, at the end, this technology helps the economy. But the problem is always the adjustment process. I don't call it that people will lose their job. It's like a redefinition of job. For example, like nurse, now they need a new skill. So that is why the role of the training, is very important. The other thing that I would like to highlight, spend more time on this, is about the regulatory. And on this particular issue, I'm very skeptical. Yeah, my concern is not about whether the business sector will be able to adjust themselves. My concern is more on the government. Yeah, because I think what we need to discuss is not Industrial 4.0, but what we need to discuss is Government 4.0. Yeah? Can you imagine that the government will issue regulation, but every 6 months, this regulation need to be replaced because the disruption. Yeah, because it's no longer relevant. People work from home. Immediately, this regulation that come to office is no longer relevant. But the problem is, how can the government can change the regulation every, I don't know, 6 months, every 1 year, because this regulation. So what we need is an agile bureaucracy. But Cheng Yong, agile bureaucracy is an oxymoron. There is no way that bureaucracy can be agile because they always work under certain system. And this is very difficult because they have to change their mindset from agree on rules to agree on principle. And this is not going to be easy because how do we draw the line when we make a regulation? Whether we should go in a very detail or like sandbox, etc. And this is really a challenge. And to be honest, I don't really have the answer. That is why, if you're talking about this, especially in Southeast Asian economy, if you want to use the technology to support the reopening, for example, I can see the opportunities. But the question is, what about the regulation on the cross-border data flows? Whether every country will allow this to happen, right? Because it's related to the issue of privacy, cybersecurity, etc. Maybe every country, because their own concern, they will create their own regulation related to that.
Yeah.
And this
Dr. Basri, let us come back to this, regulation and the policy issues a bit later, also in more detail. I think a lot of these remarks share some similar concerns. Also, I myself experienced that during the probably COVID contact tracing, and then like everybody's kind of requested, and then we are somehow also willingly giving out our information, private data to contact tracing and also in the digital device. I'm also asking our panelist, Dr. Kumar, if you have any thoughts about how we have to also control or secure more data privacy, and then like what are kind of measures to ensure cybersecurity and any threats to these the private data in the digital platforms. Can I invite Dr. Kumar?
Yes, good afternoon, and thank you very much, Ms. Nalaro, for this invitation to reconnect with the ADB, and delighted to be here. I'll take up the answer to your specific question a bit later, but may I first point out to some of the challenges and then the opportunities, and then come to the issue of data privacy. On the challenges, as the data shown by James shows itself, I'm a bit worried that the share of trade in world GDP as we go forward until 2030 seems to be declining even further. What I notice from the data is the world GDP is in a scenario is increasing by 6.8% and then 13.8% between 25 and 30, and the trade increases only by 3% and 6.4%. Now, this is something that I thought digitization of the world commerce will prevent, but it seems that digitization may be helping deglobalization, as it were, and preferring localization. At least that data shows, and there is something that we must all be very aware of and try and prevent, if you like, especially the multilateral organizations and also, of course, their member countries. So I think that's the first thing, and the other challenge that I notice, and I've seen it in India and I've seen it in other countries, that work from home and digitization is resulting in an informalization of the labor force, which is that the formal labor relationships, the industrial relations are going through a very big change. There is a decreasing concept of a permanent employment, and a lot of it is becoming much more flexible, much more informal. Now that could be good in terms of overall growth, but I'm not sure what it does to what it does to the welfare levels of the labor, of the working class. And related to that, again, because we are all now working from homes and not coming together anywhere, is the fragmentation of the workforce and of social capital. I think digitization will have a serious, could have a serious impact on the quality of the social capital, of which a necessary part is the workplace, where you interact and where you mix and where you get new ideas and get more empathetic and get some empathy with each other. I think that's and how do we prevent this? Because my recent book by Kai-Fu Klim's book is Lowell. I've read it serious, now what is called the AI superpowers. That when you talk about the digital economy combined with artificial intelligence and deep machine learning, he is of the view that this is one technology revolution which may not generate as much jobs as it destroys, unlike the other 4 technology revolutions. And what you need, therefore, is a whole very conscious effort at creating empathy, at creating social capital, at improving the relationships, because this is forcing people to go away. This is also forcing people to sink in many vocations, and only a few very skilled, highly skilled ones will remain. So I think for me, this is a serious concern in terms of the quality of life, as to how this will affect. And what do we do as conscious citizens, policymakers, to prevent this deterioration in the quality of life? People have already talked about the digital divide between countries and within countries. I don't want to belabor the point, but I do want to say that digital infrastructure must be seen as a public good, which has huge externalities and some negative externalities, and therefore the role of the state, the role of the government becomes very important, not merely as a regulator and somebody is compliant, but also as an entity which will make sure that we minimize the negative externalities and maximize the positive ones, and the one that I mentioned already. In terms of the opportunities, by the way, on the digital infrastructure, our Prime Minister recently announced on 15th of August that in the next 1,000 days, that's 3 years plus, India will connect all its 600,000 villages by optic fiber. And that is the way to avoid the digital divide. Already 150,000 village clusters are connected with optic fiber. We want to connect the others, 100,000 clusters, but also every village in India, 600,000 of them will be connected to optic fiber to ensure broadband bandwidth availability, and to ensure that people do get the same quality of access to the digital world as others. On the opportunities, we in the government of India, led by the Prime Minister, see this as the big opportunity for India to solve its multifarious, huge, humongous problems, and where we can see technology being used, to very good effect. As a result of that, we see this in 7 very important areas: improving financial inclusion, improving logistics in as diverse and as huge a country, a continental size as India. We see this as improving agriculture value chains, because in agriculture, traceability and the quality is very important, which is often not there, and the farmers therefore lose out on that. So therefore, from farm to fork, if we can use blockchain, and if we can use blockchain for improving the traceability and improving the value of the farmer gets, that will be very big. The 4th issue is on digital healthcare. We already have a digital health mission. Everybody will be issued a digital identity, digital health identity, so that it becomes portable, and then we can go, and then we can receive the quality of health wherever we like. And this will help also our public health insurance program. On education, again, the pandemic has shown that digital access and digital technology can be a big, big win, both for improving access as well as for improving the quality of education. Already all our universities and our colleges, millions of them are now working through the digital platform. We've got a lot of digital learning technology and platforms already going. This can improve continuously to make it much more through enhanced reality and virtual reality to give them the best field, the best experience on the field. The last two is retail trade. Already e-commerce is all very valid. The challenge in India, and I think a lot of other emerging economies, is how to integrate the family stores, the mom and pop stores, the small retail traders into the digital world so that they don't get wiped out, so that we don't just become the big huge supermarkets and nothing at all there. But this is a big experiment that is going on in India at the moment, whereby we are trying to bring the advantages of digital procurement and digital selling, digital marketing and artificial intelligence tracking of the consumer behavior to the small, to the mom and pop store, because it is possible through the new technology. And all of these, by the way, now they are now being developed in Niti Aayog as technical garages. We call them tech garage. And in tech garage, we combine the government and the private sector together to work together for a public-private partnership to find these solutions, because the government alone can't do it. The last issue, and which is very important for us, is governance. And I think the digital technology, the digital world offers a tremendous scope for improving governance down the line, to improving transparency, accountability, efficiency, and credibility of governance. I think those are the issues which will become very important, and I think they can yield substantial gains for improving public welfare, improving public life, as also improving the digital, as also improving the growth scenarios and reducing inequality, because that has to be done very consciously. So I think we are in a new world, and India will seize these opportunities with both hands and take forward and use it to leapfrog in our own sense, because that's the only way we can meet the aspirations of our young people. Thank you very much for listening.
Okay, thank you. Both Dr. Basri and then Dr. Kumar have outlined broadly like a key policy areas to harness the potential of digital economy in developing countries. But from the private sector's point of view, digital transformation significantly changes the way the business will operate. Like in the, the environment of doing business is going to be quite different. Barbara, what is your view of the enabling ecosystem for businesses? What do you see that priorities of policymakers and then regulators to tackle to ensure enabling ecosystem for digital enabled business models?
Yeah, thank you. Something that I think that we are seeing, and probably, will sound familiar to you. There is a background noise, sorry, I'm not sure if it's me. Yeah, okay. Something that we are seeing, and probably, people that is listening to me will agree that, governments are becoming more nationalistic and protectionist, right? The reason, and we have seen a trend before COVID, but I think that COVID has also accelerated that, right? Then what is the reason why I'm saying this before moving into the policy aspect? Because it's impacting the way that governments are regulating and the way that governments are thinking about policies, right? Then looking, from my perspective, I will highlight a few things. First of all, I will say what is the what is the purpose when a government put in place a policy or a regulation? Is the purpose to be protectionist, or is the purpose to grow the national economy, right? Because the purpose in that sense is very different. We are seeing governments that take a protectionist approach, or governments that take growing the national economy approach. And this is not about national versus foreigners, right? This is another trend that we are seeing. Then that I will say this is the first thing. The second thing that I will mention is regulators, policymakers needs to understand the pros and cons of the regulation that they are proposing. Why I'm saying this, that it sounds like as a common sense, because it's not there all the time, right? We have seen, or I have seen in different countries, different years, governments, policymakers taking an approach that it harms their own economy. And it's just because there was not a previous assessment, right? Then it is important to understand, if the regulation in place, maybe to protect security or maybe to protect privacy, it's killing innovation or it's killing the economy itself, right? And doing assessment, I think it is important. Another thing that I will suggest, or I don't want to say suggest, I will say is the copy paste Europe. I'm gonna copy this regulation and I'm gonna put it in my country. I think that we all know that the reality of each country is very different. Again, I mean, this is something that I have seen, regulation that was copied from Europe and tried to do this copy paste in a country here in Asia, and the reality is so different, right? Then it is better to understand what is the problem that the country is trying to solve for, and then develop a regulation that it really fits those needs. And the last one, the last comment, it was said by Dr. Kumar, and I completely agree, is the private public. He mentioned partnership, I will say dialogue, right? And that's where the multilateral approach and institutions as ADB have a great role to play, create the space for a greater dialogue. It was said before, like, how we are going to regulate every 6 months. I completely agree. It's completely impossible to regulate every 6 months, but that is the speed where we are in right now. Then this dialogue is needed to ensure that whatever regulation is in place or policies are in place are useful, are helpful, are not stoppers. Then if not, there is a lot of time invested in discussing with very little outcome. Thank you.
Thank you, Barbara. Very insightful. For Professor Lee, in fact, there are a lot of discussion related to the, changing work, right, for the future. Like this, people were worried about the technology will lead to a displacement of job. You also highlighted the importance of human capital development to prepare for the future. What do you feel as policy priorities in these countries to make sure that everybody has an access to these digital driven transformation and also economic opportunity in the digital economy?
Thank you. I think that's a really important issue because now we really need to make workers and firms to rescale and upskill in response to the rapid technological change. It's not just the digital transformation. Now we are living in the era of new technology change. So how to build the appropriate skills, that's as just moderator said, is really important to get the maximum benefits from these new technologies. So I think it's the now of course we are really discussing how to make the online education better and accessible by all the children. I mean, that's a really challenging issue at this moment, especially in the less developed countries. if we go a little bit beyond that, I think it's the fundamental issue is the lifelong learning mechanism. Each country is of course, educating children is also important, but we need to educate the older people to get really access to the new technologies. And then some people are working in the older industries, but now we see the new opportunities coming from the rise of the e-commerce, digital healthcare, and this, so other industries. So how we could make them work in this new environment? I think a lifelong learning mechanism is very important. We can discuss the details, but I think it's the ADB also produced a lot of useful application at the documents, so we can use that. I think it's the one important issue is emphasized by the Dr. Kumar and Ms. Navarro is the collaboration or dialogue or partnership, whatever you call. I mean, one country cannot solve all the problems. I mean, so maybe you can learn some best practice, and also we can get some assistance from the better situated countries to learn. I mean, what would be the best practice. So I think it's also in terms of the regulation and then other important issues, how to, as Dr. Park asked at the beginning in the earlier, how to promote this kind of the business environment to promote innovation, but as Ms. Navarro emphasized, and also the Dr. Basri emphasized, we should not make this too much regulation kills innovation. I mean, we want to encourage the innovation, but with appropriate check and balance. I mean, I think it's so I guess the one important issue is really making the digital transformation to lead to the inclusive and sustainable economic development in every country in Asia. Then I think it's we need to look at the worker side and then even the future workers, how to train them. So we need to build a little bit incentive mechanism, and then also ADB could help. And of course, I mean, the important issue is also financing. I think it's now we discuss infrastructure, and James raised this important issue. We need to really build these resources to help countries each other. I mean, we cannot really assume that all individual countries solve all the problems by themselves. I mean, we need some more regional and global partnerships, and clearly the support of the international organizations such as ADB could play a very important role. Let me stop here. Thank you.
Thank you. Dr. Basri, you earlier mentioned really importance of digital connectivity infrastructure, and also there's a really wide varying gap in digital readiness across ASEAN. The questions from the floor also points to the concern about the developing countries being left behind in the trend of digital transformation. What will be your suggestions or recommendations for the countries to prioritize to make sure that the developing countries do catch up using these technologies?
Well, thank you, Shin Yong. I think Barbara also, Jonghwa already mentioned about this, that we need a dialogue because we have to address this issue from both government and also the private sector. Yeah, in Southeast Asian economies, I can see the opportunities because the market is there, the population is there. So automatically, investor would like to invest in Southeast Asian economies. But somehow we need the basic infrastructure. And here is the role of the government. So like it or not, if you're talking about this, if this project is not commercially viable, then the government need to focus on that. But if there is a sort of like a business opportunities, I believe that the private sector will come in, and then the cooperation, collaboration, not only within the developing country, but also company from the advanced country, somehow will help. I can give an example in the case of Indonesia, about 4 out of 6 of the unicorn are basically based in Indonesia. And why is that? Because the market is huge. And many investors now start to invest in Indonesia. So somehow the cooperation between or dialogue between the private sector and the government perhaps could a sort of like, could minimize the gap.
Thank you. Dr. Kumar, there's a question from the floor as well. What will be the role of digital technologies in transforming the mega cities? I mean, we see also some comments about, concentration helps because concentration actually attracts talents, right? But then sometimes there are also other discussion. The mobile and then distance technology will allow people work from afar. They don't have to be living in the big city and then being concentrated. What is your view?
I quite agree with that. And in fact, new technologies would can help us decongest our cities and make them more livable and take care of the slums. And the thought that I have is follows. The hypothesis, the theory is that big collections lead to better generation of ideas because people come together and cups of coffee and therefore Manhattan is important. But now a lot of interaction can be replaced by interaction on the cloud. And the cloud interaction with, as I said, new technology developments like augmented and virtual reality could mean that people could interact in very sort of real life-like spaces and can have that interaction. So therefore, if you can, if optical fiber can reach everywhere, you can effectively provide that connectivity whereby people may not find it necessary to migrate to the big city. One point which is that the big cities themselves can be made, the living conditions can be made better with the use of new technology by, for example, sharing cars through digital means. The mobile experience, that not everybody may need to own their own personal vehicle for commuting, etc. So I think all of that could mean the digital technology will have, in many ways, improve the urban experience and help cities develop smart cities and decongested cities.
Thank you. Related to that, in fact, there are a few other comments, questions from the floor suggesting that the role of digital technologies for sustainable development. Will it be less energy consuming? Will it be more green development? Do you have anything to add to that?
Yeah. Let me just take a first shot at it, which is that I think digital technology can give us much greener growth than what we have today. It can optimize fuel consumption, it can optimize material consumption, it can optimize travel times, and it can make the world much less resource intensive than what it is today. We are using some of that already in agriculture, which uses more than 94% of the water that is available, and water is in a serious situation. And if in agriculture you use the sensors and control and optimize the use of water for plant, it can be reduced by a tenth or to a tenth almost. So I think overall, digital technology has big hopes, and I'm very optimistic about it. For our environmental concerns and for carbon emissions and for carbon footprint. I think overall it'll be much greener than before.
Thank you. So I'm going to leave just one question for all panelists, and then as a wrap up, if you can give us one takeaway, from this digital transformation challenges and how we can together solve. If share just the one key takeaway messages, that would be great. Dr. Basri, can you share?
I think talking about opportunities is there, but as I said, how can government and the private sector can sit together and solve the issue? Especially my concern is more on the regulatory issue. Yeah, And then also this cooperation between private and the government somehow could mitigate the some of the problems that may arise because this the process of this digital transformation is not always easy. So the key words is perhaps the cooperation between the private sector and the government.
Dr. Lee?
Thank you. I think it's this my one message is also related to the question raised from the floor is on the creative destruction. I think it's we cannot really assume that the rise of a new industry can bring the huge benefit at the aggregate level. There must be appropriate role of the government as well as the society. So I think we discussed a lot, but I think we cannot, one issue I want to just raise again is that we cannot leave everything to the current government and big tech companies to make the wise and long-lasting good decisions. So as a society as a whole, I mean, we need to discuss a lot, like at this kind of panel, what will be the appropriate policies government should do. I think it's the one key issue is raised by the other panelists, how to make the balance between innovation and regulation. Thank you.
Okay. Ms. Navarro?
Yeah, I will say, let's take the opportunities that are very clear. Let's agree on what are the important challenges and let's work together to overcome those important challenges.
Okay, last but not the least, I'm gonna ask James to give his final key messages to take away. James, you're muted.
Yeah, thank you, Sin Yang. I agree with Dr. Jong Lee. While we presented a huge economic dividend from digital transformation, these are actually not automatic. There's so many institutional, policy, infrastructure, process improvement that needs to happen so that these aggregated level impact can be realized. But what we wanted to show in this analysis is that if we are able to make these government reform, improve governance, improve infrastructure, invest in our skills, there's a huge dividend that could be realized and could be shared with members of society. That's all, Dinian.
Okay. Thank you. Thank you very much for all very active participation. Before I close, let me emphasize again the report that we are preparing is going to be published in February 2021. This is going to be the Making Digital Transformation Works in Asia and Pacific as a part of our annual report, Asian Economic Integration Report. Let me now thank all presenters and then panelists, the participants, James, Barbara, Jonghwa, Shatip, Basri, and Rajiv Kumar. Thank you all for your time and insightful statement. Please join us in our next Asia Impact on October 1st, 2020. And this special event will feature ADB's Distinguished Lecture Program with Professor Michael Kramer as he explores incentives to accelerate vaccine access for everyone. Thank you.